The chains around Daijung's wrists were cold and heavy. They glowed with a faint blue light that made his skin itch. He stood in the center of a massive hall, and everywhere he looked he saw aliens staring down at him. The Valthorics were tall creatures with dark red scales that shimmered under the bright lights. Each one had 4 arms, and their eyes were completely black like pools of ink. They wore elaborate armor decorated with symbols Daejung didn't recognize. At the far end of the hall sat Lord Thexrel on a throne made of some kind of black metal. He was even larger than the other Valthorics, with scars running across his face and chest. Golden rings decorated each of his 4 arms, and a crown of sharp metal points sat on his head. He leaned forward, studying Daejung the way someone might study an insect. "So this is a human," Thexral said, his voice deep and rumbling. The translator device in Daejung's ear turned his words into Korean. "Such a small, weak thing. Your species has been traveling space for what? 300 of your years?" Daejung said nothing. He kept his eyes locked on the alien lord's face. "The Valthorix Empire has ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years, Thexral continued. He waved one of his hands dismissively. "We had conquered 1,000 worlds before your ancestors even learned to make fire, and yet you dare to trespass on our sacred grounds." "I was looking for my brother," Daejung finally spoke. His voice was steady despite the fear running through his veins. "He went missing near those ruins. I just wanted to find out what happened to him." Thexral laughed, and the sound echoed through the hall. The other Valthorics joined in, creating a horrible chorus that made Daejung's teeth hurt. "Your brother is dead, human. He stuck his nose where it didn't belong, just like you. The ruins on that moon are forbidden to all lesser species. The fact that you thought you had the right to land there shows how arrogant your kind has become." Daejung felt anger burning in his chest, pushing away some of his fear. "Lesser species? We've done nothing to you. We just want to explore and learn." "Explore?" Thexrel stood up from his throne, his full height making him look like a giant. "You want to dig up secrets that are not meant for primitive creatures like you. You want to pretend you belong among the true powers of this galaxy." One of the Valthorics standing near the throne, slightly smaller than the others but with more decorations on his armor, stepped forward. "My lord," he said carefully, "perhaps we should simply imprison this human and return him to his people. The humans have been relatively peaceful. Starting a conflict over one trespasser might not be wise." Thexrel's head snapped toward the advisor so fast that Daejung heard the scales on his neck crack. "Are you questioning me, Vexirus?" Vexirus bowed his head immediately. "Never, my lord. I only suggest caution." "Caution," Thexral repeated mockingly. "You want me to show caution to this insect?" He turned back to Daejung, and his black eyes seemed to grow even darker. "No. This human will learn what happens when you disrespect the Valthorix Empire. He will learn the price of arrogance." Thexral walked down the steps from his throne until he stood directly in front of Daejung. Even in chains, Daejung refused to look away. He met the alien lord's gaze without blinking. "You have spirit," Thexral said quietly. "I will enjoy breaking it. Guards, take him to the outer airlock. We will perform the ancient punishment. Void casting." A murmur ran through the assembled Valthorics. Some looked excited, others uncomfortable. Vexirus opened his mouth as if to speak again, but then closed it, his expression grim. 2 massive guards grabbed Daejung by his arms and dragged him toward a door at the side of the hall. He tried to plant his feet, tried to resist, but they were far stronger than him. The chains around his wrists sent painful shocks through his body whenever he struggled. They pulled him through corridor after corridor. The ship was enormous, with high ceilings and walls covered in strange patterns. Other Valthorics stopped to watch as he was dragged past, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. Finally, they reached a section of the ship where the walls were bare metal and the air felt colder. The guards threw Daejung into a small room with a circular door on the opposite wall. Through the thick window in that door, he could see nothing but empty black space filled with distant stars. An airlock. Daejung's heart started pounding harder. He had heard stories of void casting, ancient tales from other alien species. It was an execution method so cruel that most civilized worlds had banned it thousands of years ago. The victim was thrown into space without a suit or any protection. They would die within seconds, their blood boiling, their lungs exploding, their bodies freezing. Lord Thexeral entered the room, followed by Vexirus and a group of other important-looking Valthorics. They positioned themselves in front of a large viewing window that showed the airlock chamber. "Last chance, human," Thexeral said. "Beg for mercy. Grovel before me, and I might consider letting you die quickly instead." Daejung looked at the alien lord. He thought about his brother Taimin, who had disappeared trying to uncover the truth about those ancient ruins. He thought about his sister Hana, who was probably searching for him right now. He thought about Earth, about humanity, about all the people who refused to bow down to bullies and tyrants. "No," Daejung said simply. Thexeral's face twisted with rage. "Then die as a fool." He gestured to one of the guards. "Throw him out." The guards grabbed Daejung again and dragged him into the airlock chamber. They removed his chains but kept tight grips on his arms until the inner door sealed shut behind them. Then they left through a side exit, leaving Daejung alone in the small metal room. Through the window, he could see Thexeral and the others watching. The alien lord raised one hand and made a casual gesture, as if he were swatting away a fly. The outer door began to open. Daejung felt the air rushing past him as the atmosphere escaped into space. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on his skin. He tried to hold his breath, knowing that breathing would only make things worse. The door opened wider, and the force pulling him toward the void became impossible to resist. His feet left the floor. His body tumbled toward the opening, toward the endless darkness beyond. He had one last glimpse of Thexeral's satisfied expression through the window. Then he was out, spinning into the vacuum of space. The cold hit him like a hammer. His ears popped, and he felt pressure building in his chest. His skin burned and froze at the same time. Every instinct screamed at him to breathe, but he kept his mouth shut. "This is it," he thought. "This is how I die." But then something strange happened. The pain began to change. It wasn't going away, but it was transforming into something else. Something almost electrical. His skin felt like it was hardening, becoming tougher. The pressure in his chest shifted, and his lungs seemed to seal themselves somehow. Daejung opened his eyes, not even realizing he had closed them. He could see the ship floating massive and dark against the stars. He could see his own hands in front of his face, and they were glowing with a very faint light. He wasn't dead. Inside the ship, through the window of the airlock control room, Daejung could see the Valthorics starting to move around in confusion. Thexeral had turned away, already walking toward the door, confident that the execution was complete. But Daejung was still moving, still conscious, still very much alive, and he was angry. Daejung floated in the emptiness of space, and his body felt wrong in ways he couldn't explain. His skin had changed texture, becoming harder and smoother, almost like stone. When he touched his face with shaking hands, it felt warm, despite the terrible cold around him. His lungs had stopped trying to breathe. Instead, something else was happening inside his chest, some kind of process he didn't understand. He should be dead. Every biology class he had ever taken told him that humans couldn't survive in vacuum. The pressure difference alone should have killed him instantly. But he was still here, still thinking, still aware. Through the black emptiness, he could see the Crimson Dominion, Lord Thexeral's warship. It was huge, maybe 3 kilometers long, shaped like a blade with engines glowing blue at the rear. Lights dotted its surface, and he could make out the tiny rectangle of the window where the Valthorics had watched him die. Except he hadn't died. Daejung tried to move, instinctively attempting to swim through space like it was water. Nothing happened at first. Then he felt something strange, a tingling sensation running along his skin. It was like static electricity but stronger, more focused. He realized he could sense the ship's energy, the electromagnetic fields from its engines and systems. He could feel them like someone might feel heat from a fire. Without really knowing how he was doing it, Daejung pushed against those fields. His body moved, slowly at first, then faster. He was propelling himself through space using nothing but his own will and whatever had happened to his body. Inside the control room, Vexirus was the first to notice something wrong. He had been standing near the window, watching the void where the human had disappeared. His job required him to observe everything, to notice details others might miss. And he noticed that the small shape of Daejung's body wasn't drifting away like it should. It was moving with purpose. "My lord," Vexirus said, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. "The human. He's still moving." Thexral, who had almost reached the door, stopped and turned around. "What are you talking about? He's dead. Humans die in vacuum within seconds." "Look," Vexirus pointed at the window with one of his 4 hands. The other Valthorics crowded around, pressing against the glass. In the distance, they could see the human floating but not drifting randomly. He was moving in a straight line, coming back toward the ship. "Impossible," one of the guards whispered. Thexral pushed his way to the window and stared out. His black eyes widened slightly, the only sign of his shock. Some kind of hidden suit. A trick. The human must have been wearing some kind of invisible protection. But even as he said it, doubt crept into his voice. They had scanned Daejung thoroughly before bringing him aboard. There had been no suit, no hidden technology, just a human in simple clothes. Vexirus was already moving to a computer terminal on the wall, his fingers flying across the controls. Data scrolled across the screen in the Valthoric's language. His expression grew more and more troubled as he read. "My lord, I'm picking up unusual energy readings from the human. His body temperature has stabilized at exactly the background radiation temperature of space. His cellular structure appears to be changing, adapting." "That's not possible," Thexral said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "I'm accessing our historical database," Vexirus continued, his voice growing more urgent. "There are old records, very old, from the Forbidden Archives. Stories about a species from the Outer Rim, beings who could survive anywhere, adapt to any environment. They were called the Inheritors. The records are fragmentary. Most were destroyed, but the descriptions—" "Get to the point," Thexral snapped. "The descriptions match humans, my lord. Same basic body structure, same homeworld type. The records say the Inheritors were seeded across the galaxy millions of years ago by the precursor civilization. They were designed to survive, to adapt, to thrive in any condition. But the genetic locks that gave them these abilities were supposed to be dormant, inactive, unless triggered by specific circumstances." Thexral grabbed Vexirus by the front of his armor and lifted him off the ground, despite the advisor being quite large himself. "Are you telling me that we've been sharing the galaxy with a species of precursor weapons and nobody knew? Not weapons, my lord. Seeds. Potential. And yes, I believe that's exactly what I'm telling you." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the control room. Red lights flashed on every panel. A computerized voice announced in the Valthoric's language. "Hull breach detected. Section 7 Alpha. Emergency bulkheads closing." Thexral dropped Vexirus and spun toward the security monitors. On one screen, they could see Daejung at the outer hull of the ship. He had reached it somehow, crossed the distance that should have been impossible. And now his hands were pressed against the metal armor plating. The metal was glowing red around his fingers. "He's melting through the hull," one of the guards said in disbelief. "All security teams to Section 7 Alpha," Thexral shouted into his communication device. "Stop that human. Use any means necessary." On the screen, they watched as Daejung tore a hole in the outer hull large enough for him to fit through. Air and debris exploded outward from the breach, but Daejung pulled himself inside against the rushing atmosphere. The security feed switched to an interior camera. It showed a corridor with curved walls and pipes running along the ceiling. Daejung stood there, his clothes torn and his body still glowing faintly with that strange light. He looked up directly at the camera, and his eyes seemed to shine. Then he started walking. A squad of Valthoric's guards appeared at the end of the corridor, 12 of them in full combat armor. They carried plasma rifles, weapons that could burn through solid steel. The squad leader shouted something, probably in order to surrender, but Daejung didn't stop walking. The guards opened fire. Bright blue bolts of superheated plasma shot down the corridor. In the control room, the Valthorics watching the monitors expected to see the human vaporized instantly. Plasma rifles were designed to kill anything, and 12 of them firing at once should have been absolute overkill. But Daejung walked through the plasma fire. The bolts hit him, burning his skin, tearing holes in his clothes. But he didn't fall. He didn't even slow down. The burns on his skin healed almost as fast as they appeared, new flesh growing to replace what was damaged. He was absorbing the energy somehow, using it to fuel his own body's impossible regeneration. The guards stopped firing, their weapons empty. They stared at the human approaching them, and even through the camera, the watching Valthorix could see their terror. Daejung reached the first guard and grabbed his rifle. He crushed it in his hands like it was made of paper. Then he shoved the guard aside, not brutally, but with enough force to send the armored Valthorix sliding 10 meters down the corridor. He did the same to the next guard, and the next. He wasn't trying to kill them. He was just moving them out of his way. More guards arrived, then combat drones, flying machines armed with heavier weapons. They filled the corridor with weapons fire. Daejung ignored them all. When the drones got in his way, he grabbed them out of the air and tore them apart. When guards blocked his path, he moved through them like they were children. In the control room, Thexrel watched his most elite warriors fail to stop a single human. His 4 hands clenched into fists. Where is he going? Vexirus traced Daejung's path on a map of the ship. He's heading toward the command deck, my lord. He's coming here. The other Valthorix in the room looked at each other nervously. Some started moving toward the doors, clearly thinking about running. Thexrel saw this and roared, "Stand your ground! He's just one creature. We are Valthorix." But his words sounded hollow even to himself. On the monitors, Daejung had just torn through a sealed bulkhead door that was supposed to be strong enough to contain a reactor breach. The human pulled the heavy metal apart with his bare hands and stepped through. "He'll be here in 3 minutes," Vexirus said quietly. Thexrel looked at his ceremonial weapon hanging on the wall, a plasma scepter that was more symbol than tool. He had carried it for 500 years, used it to execute criminals and enemies. He walked over and picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. "Seal the command deck," he ordered. "Full lockdown. And someone tell me how to kill this thing." No one answered. They all just watched the monitors as Daejung climbed a maintenance shaft, jumped across a gap that should have been too wide, and continued his steady, unstoppable progress toward them. The human wasn't running. He wasn't hurrying. He was just walking with terrible, patient determination, like a force of nature that couldn't be reasoned with or stopped. The command deck doors were made of reinforced metal 20 centimeters thick. They were designed to withstand direct hits from missiles and could only be opened with specific authorization codes known to a handful of high-ranking officers. Lord Thexrel stood behind these doors, his plasma scepter charged and ready, surrounded by his personal guard of elite warriors. They heard Daejung before they saw him. The sound of metal tearing echoed through the corridor outside. Then came the screech of something heavy being dragged across the floor. The guard captain checked his tactical display, and his scales went pale. "He's ripping out support beams and using them as crowbars," the captain reported. "My lord, he's going to pry the doors open." Thexrel wanted to say something commanding and confident, but his throat had gone dry. Instead, he just aimed his weapon at the door and waited. The doors groaned under immense pressure. The metal began to bend inward, slowly at first, then faster. A gap appeared between the 2 heavy panels, and through it, they could see Daejung. His hands gripped the edge of each door, and he was pulling them apart through sheer physical strength. The gap widened. Daejung's face appeared in the opening, and his eyes locked onto Lord Thexrel. There was no rage in those eyes, no hatred, just cold determination. With a final wrenching sound, the doors gave way. Daejung stepped through onto the command deck, and for a moment, nobody moved. The Valthorix guards stared at him, their weapons raised but their fingers frozen on the triggers. They had all seen the security footage. They knew what happened to everyone who had tried to stop this human. Daejung looked around the room slowly, taking in the curved walls covered with display screens, the command stations where terrified officers sat frozen, and finally, Lord Thexrel standing on the raised platform where his throne sat. "You wanted to show me the void," Daejung said. His voice was rough, damaged by exposure to vacuum but already healing. "Thank you." It showed me what I really am. Thexeral raised his plasma scepter with all four arms, trying to make the gesture look powerful rather than desperate. You think you've won, human? You think surviving my judgment makes you superior? He laughed, but it sounded forced. I am Lord Thexeral, conqueror of the 70 systems, master of— I don't care, Daejung interrupted, still walking forward. I only care about one thing, my brother, Taemin. What did you do to him? The guards parted as Daejung approached, none of them willing to get in his way. Thexeral's mouth opened and closed, and some of his earlier arrogance cracked. Your brother was a criminal. He trespassed on sacred ground just like you. He paid the price for his disrespect. You killed him. It wasn't a question. I did what was necessary to protect the order of this galaxy. Daejung reached the steps leading up to Thexeral's platform. He started climbing them, each footstep heavy and deliberate. Thexeral aimed his scepter directly at Daejung's chest. Don't come any closer or I will fire. This weapon can vaporize a battle tank. Daejung didn't stop. He climbed another step, then another. Thexeral fired. The plasma blast was blindingly bright, a concentrated beam of energy hot enough to melt through starship armor. It hit Daejung square in the chest and exploded outward in waves of heat that made every Valthorix in the room shield their eyes. When the light faded, there was a smoking crater in the floor where Daejung had been standing. Thexeral lowered his weapon slowly, breathing hard. Several of the guards let out relieved breaths. Then Daejung stepped out of the crater. His shirt was gone, burned away completely. His chest was red and blistered, showing terrible burns that would have killed any normal human. But as they watched, the burns began to heal. The blisters shrank, the red faded, and new skin grew over the damaged areas. Within seconds, Daejung's chest looked completely normal, except for the scars. And his body was glowing brighter than before, like he had absorbed the energy from the weapon and was now using it to fuel himself. Thexeral took a step backward, then another. His weapon fell from his hands and clattered on the floor. What are you? The alien lord whispered. Daejung took another step up, now at the same level as Thexeral. Up close, the human was much smaller than the Valthorix lord, but somehow he seemed larger, more present, more real. I'm someone looking for answers, Daejung said, and you're going to give them to me. Thexeral's legs seemed to stop working properly. He stumbled backward and sat down heavily on his throne. No longer the proud conqueror, but just a frightened old creature facing something he didn't understand. Vexirus, who had been standing quietly to the side throughout all of this, stepped forward. His four hands were raised in a gesture of peace. I can explain, the advisor said. If you'll allow me. Daejung looked at him but said nothing, which Vexirus took as permission to continue. Your brother didn't die because he was disrespectful, Vexirus began. He died because he found something we couldn't allow him to keep. On that moon, in those ruins, there are devices left behind by an ancient civilization. The precursors, we call them. They existed millions of years ago and vanished, but they left behind technology and knowledge scattered across thousands of worlds. What does that have to do with my brother? The devices respond to human genetic patterns, Vexirus continued. Only humans can activate them. Your brother found one of these devices, and it began a process. It started unlocking something in his DNA, something that's been dormant in your species for a very long time. Daejung felt his heart beating faster, though it still wasn't beating normally. The rhythm was different now, stronger. Unlocking what? The truth about what humans really are, Vexirus said. You're not a young species that evolved on Earth naturally. Your ancestors were planted there millions of years ago by the precursors. They gave you genetic locks, abilities that would activate under certain conditions. Extreme environmental stress, exposure to specific radiation patterns, contact with precursor technology. Your species was designed to be survivors, to adapt to anything, to thrive anywhere. That's impossible, Daejung said, but even as he spoke, he looked down at his hands. They were glowing faintly, still processing the energy from Thexeral's weapon. He had survived in hard vacuum. He had torn through starship armor with his bare hands. He had walked through weapons fire that should have killed him 20 times over. Maybe it wasn't impossible. The Valthorix Empire has known this for thousands of years, Vexirus continued. We found precursor records that explained what humans were, and we made a decision. We couldn't allow humanity to learn the truth. If your species understood what you could become, if those genetic locks started activating across your whole population, you would be unstoppable. You would inherit the galaxy just as the precursors intended. So you've been killing us, Daejung said quietly. Any human who got close to the truth. Yes, Vexirus said simply. We destroyed evidence, assassinated explorers and scientists, manipulated galactic law to keep humanity contained in a small region of space. We told ourselves it was necessary for galactic stability. We told ourselves we were preventing chaos. Daejung turned back to Thexral, who sat slumped on his throne. The alien lord looked smaller somehow, diminished. How many? Daejung asked. How many humans have you killed? Thexral's voice was barely a whisper. Hundreds, over the centuries. Anyone who got too close to precursor sites or started asking the wrong questions. Your brother was one of many. The glow around Daejung's body intensified, responding to his anger. Frost formed on the metal near his feet as his body pulled energy from his surroundings. Several display screens cracked from the temperature differential. Give me one reason, Daejung said, his voice dangerously calm. Why I shouldn't tear this entire ship apart with you still in it. Thexral opened his mouth, but no words came out. All his pride, all his power, all his centuries of authority meant nothing in front of this human who refused to die. Finally, Thexral did something he had never done in his 500 years of life. He slid off his throne and dropped to his knees, all four hands pressed against the floor in the Valthorix gesture of complete submission. Spare me, the alien lord said, his voice breaking. Please, I'll give you anything. Access to all our records on humanity. Every file we have on the precursors. The locations of all their sites we've found. Everything. Just spare me. Daejung looked down at the groveling creature who had thrown him into the void, expecting him to die. The creature who had killed his brother and countless other humans just to maintain power. You should have killed me when you had the chance, Daejung said. Now you're going to help me wake my entire species. Before Thexral could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. A communications officer called out from his station. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Human signatures. It's a battle group, my lord. They're hailing us. Daejung smiled for the first time since arriving on the Crimson Dominion. His sister had found him. Hana stood on the bridge of the carrier Youngmin's Pride, staring at the view screen that showed the Crimson Dominion floating in the darkness ahead. She had tracked her brother's captured ship to this location, calling in every favor she had with the military to assemble a rescue force. 8 warships now surrounded the Valthorix vessel, their weapons charged and ready. Still no response to our hails, her communications officer reported. The Valthorix ship appears to be intact, but they're not answering. Scan for human life signs, Hana ordered, though she was terrified of what the answer might be. They had intercepted transmissions mentioning void casting. If Thexral had really thrown her brother into space without protection, then this rescue mission had become a recovery mission. I'm picking up something strange, the science officer said, studying his displays with confusion. There's a human life sign on the Crimson Dominion, but the readings don't make sense. The energy signature is off the charts, unlike anything in our database. Before Hana could respond, the view screen flickered. Instead of showing the Valthorix ship, it now displayed the interior of what looked like a command deck. And standing in the center of the screen was her brother. Daejung! Hana's hands gripped the armrests of her chair so hard they creaked. You're alive. Are you injured? Are you a prisoner? Daejung smiled at her through the screen. His clothes were torn and scorched, and there was something different about his eyes, a faint glow that hadn't been there before. But he was standing, moving, very much alive. I'm fine, Hana. Better than fine, actually. But I need you to do something for me. Open a channel to every ship in your battle group and patch in all available frequencies. What I'm about to tell you needs to reach as many people as possible. Daejung, what's going on? What happened to you? Just trust me, please. Hana looked at her communications officer and nodded. Within seconds, channels opened to every human ship in the fleet. The officer also activated emergency broadcast frequencies that would reach any nearby vessels or stations. "Ready," Hana said. The camera view on the screen pulled back, showing more of the Valthoric's command deck. Hana could see alien officers at their stations, guards standing nervously along the walls, and something that made her breath catch. Lord Thexrel, the feared Valthoric's warlord she had heard so many horror stories about, was on his knees before her brother with his head bowed. "My name is Dae-Jung," her brother began, speaking calmly and clearly. "Some of you know me, most of you don't. But what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about humanity." He proceeded to explain what Vexirus had told him, about the precursors, about humanity's true origins, about the genetic locks built into every human that could activate under extreme conditions. As he spoke, he demonstrated. He held out his hand and it began to glow brighter, energy dancing across his skin like electricity. On the Jungmin's Pride, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence. On the other human ships, similar scenes played out. Thousands of humans heard Dae-Jung's words and saw the impossible things his body could do. "The Valthorics have been suppressing this knowledge for thousands of years," Dae-Jung continued. "They've killed hundreds of our people to keep this secret. They destroyed evidence, manipulated galactic politics, and did everything they could to make sure humanity never learned what we really are." The camera turned to show Thexrel fully. The alien lord remained on his knees, broken and defeated. "Lord Thexrel threw me into space without protection, expecting me to die. Instead, my body adapted, the genetic locks activated, and now I'm going to make sure every human knows the truth." As Dae-Jung spoke, Vexirus stepped forward and began uploading files through the ship's communication system. Documents, videos, scans of ancient ruins, precursor texts that had been hidden for millennia. All of it poured out into human networks, spreading faster than anyone could stop it. "This information is spreading to Earth right now," Dae-Jung said. "To every human colony, every research station, every ship. You can't suppress it anymore. The truth is out." Hana found her voice finally. "Dae-Jung, this is incredible. But we need to get you out of there. Even if what you're saying is true, you're still on an enemy ship surrounded by hostile forces." "I know. But there's something else I need to do first." Dae-Jung looked directly at the camera, but Hana knew he wasn't talking to her anymore. He was talking to everyone watching. "I need volunteers. Humans willing to visit the precursor sites to undergo controlled awakening processes. We need to understand our abilities, learn how to activate them safely. We need researchers, scientists, soldiers, anyone brave enough to be part of humanity's transformation." On the Jungmin's Pride, every member of Hana's crew who wasn't actively piloting the ship raised their hand. Similar scenes occurred across the entire fleet. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thexrel finally looked up from the floor. His voice was hollow, defeated. "You've doomed us all. Once humanity fully awakens, no species in the galaxy will be able to stand against you. You'll take everything." Dae-Jung turned to look down at the alien lord. "That's where you're wrong. We don't want to take anything. We just want the freedom to exist, to explore, to be what we were meant to be. If you had left us alone, if you had treated us with respect instead of fear, none of this would have happened." A new voice cut into the transmission. It was deep and carried authority that made even Thexrel flinch. "This is High Commander Cormac of the Valthoric Central Fleet. Lord Thexrel, report immediately. We are detecting massive information breaches and unauthorized transmissions from your vessel." Thexrel looked at Dae-Jung with something like pleading in his eyes. The human gestured for him to respond. "Commander," Thexrel said weakly, "the situation is complex. The human prisoner has survived void casting and has taken control of my ship. He has also released all classified information regarding the precursor humans to the entire galaxy." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "Clarify. Are you saying a single human has defeated your entire crew and commandeered the Crimson Dominion?" "Yes, Commander." Another pause, longer this time. "All Valthoric's forces in your sector are being mobilized. Maintain your position. We will contain this situation. Daejung smiled grimly. You can't contain this. It's already spreading across every network, every communication channel. By tomorrow, every species in the galaxy will know what humanity really is. You can't put this knowledge back in the box. Vexirus stepped forward again. If I may speak, High Commander, I have analyzed the situation extensively. The human is correct. The information has reached too many systems, been copied too many times. Additionally, I believe attempting to suppress humanity with military force now would be catastrophic. They will resist, and based on what I've witnessed, they have the capability to win. Traitor, Thexrel hissed. Pragmatist, Vexirus corrected calmly. I serve the Valthrix Empire by ensuring its survival, not its destruction. Continuing this policy of suppression will only unite humanity against us. The High Commander's voice came back. I'm receiving reports from across the galaxy. Multiple species are picking up these transmissions. The Zentari Collective is demanding explanations. The Kron Assembly is calling an emergency council session. Lord Thexrel, you have created a galactic crisis. I created nothing, Thexrel said bitterly. The humans were always going to discover the truth eventually. We should have exterminated them when they were still primitive. Daejung's eyes flashed with anger, and the temperature on the command deck dropped several degrees. Say that again, he said quietly, dangerously. Thexrel closed his mouth and looked away. Hana's voice cut through the tension. Daejung, I'm sending over a shuttle. We're bringing you home. Not yet, Daejung said. There's one more thing I need to do. He turned to face Thexrel fully. You're going to stand trial, not in a Valthorix court and not in a human one, a neutral galactic tribunal. You're going to answer for every human you've killed, every life you've destroyed to maintain your empire's power. No court will convict me, Thexrel said, but there was no confidence in his voice. The Valthorix are too powerful. They'll protect me. Vexirus shook his head. Not anymore, my lord. You just confessed to centuries of conspiracy and murder in front of representatives from dozens of species. The Empire cannot protect you from this. They won't even try. You're a liability now. The reality of his situation seemed to finally sink in for Thexrel. His four shoulders slumped, and he looked suddenly ancient and fragile. What happens to me? He asked quietly. Justice, Daejung said simply. Real justice. Not the kind where the powerful do whatever they want and the weak suffer in silence. Alarms suddenly blared on the human ships. Sensors detected multiple Valthorix warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, at least 20 of them, all heavily armed. But before anyone could react, more ships appeared. Human vessels, arriving in response to the broadcast. Then ships from other species drawn by curiosity or concern. Within minutes, the space around the Crimson Dominion was crowded with vessels from across the galaxy, all watching, all waiting to see what would happen next. The galaxy had heard humanity's truth, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 months after the incident on the Crimson Dominion, Daejung stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on the neutral station called Haven's Rest. The hall was massive, built to accommodate delegates from hundreds of different species, each with their own environmental needs and physical requirements. The air was carefully controlled, the lighting adjusted to suit multiple types of vision, and translators hummed constantly as dozens of languages were converted in real time. Lord Thexrel sat in a containment field at the center of the hall, awaiting judgment. The former warlord looked nothing like the proud conqueror who had thrown Daejung into the void. His armor was gone, replaced by simple gray clothing. His forearms hung limply at his sides, and his black eyes stared at nothing. The tribunal had lasted weeks. Evidence was presented, witnesses testified, and the galaxy learned the full extent of the Valthorix conspiracy. Not just the murders of humans, but the suppression of other species who had shown signs of precursor heritage. The manipulation of trade routes and political systems. The destruction of archaeological sites that might have revealed uncomfortable truths. Now, the 3 judges from neutral species delivered their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Thexrel would spend the rest of his very long life in a prison facility, stripped of title and authority, his name recorded in history as a cautionary tale about the dangers of empire and arrogance. Daejung watched the former lord being led away and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, no joy. Just a deep tiredness and the knowledge that justice, however imperfect, had been served. It's not enough, is it? A voice said beside him. He turned to see his sister Hana. She wore her military uniform, medals gleaming on her chest. She had been promoted twice since the incident, her role in rescuing Dae-jung making her something of a hero. It doesn't bring Taemin back, Dae-jung said quietly. Or any of the others they killed. No, but it's something. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the crowds of delegates discussing the verdict, forming alliances and making plans for the new galactic order that was emerging. How are the awakening programs going? Dae-jung asked finally. Hana pulled up a datapad and showed him statistics. Better than expected. We've established controlled awakening sites at 12 precursor locations so far. Thousands of humans have volunteered. About 30% show some level of ability activation. Most just get enhanced physical capabilities, faster healing, better endurance. But some, she scrolled through files showing remarkable cases. A woman named Bo-ra, who could sense electromagnetic fields with perfect accuracy. A man named Junho, who had survived a reactor breach that should have killed him instantly, his body absorbing the radiation and converting it to energy. A teenager named Young Mi, who could see in complete darkness and across most of the electromagnetic spectrum. And you? Dae-jung asked. Have you gone through the process? Hana nodded. Last week, I showed moderate enhancement, faster reflexes, better spatial awareness, improved healing. Nothing as dramatic as what happened to you, but I can definitely feel the difference. She flexed her hand, and Dae-jung saw a faint shimmer around it, like heat distortion. The doctors say my abilities might develop more over time. How's Earth handling all of this? There's panic in some places, excitement in others. The government is struggling to manage the social changes. Some people are afraid of those who've awakened. Others worship them. There have been incidents, but overall we're managing. It helps that you've been so visible, showing people that awakened humans aren't monsters or gods, just people with new capabilities. Dae-jung had indeed been very public over the past 3 months. He had given countless interviews, visited dozens of worlds, and spoken to any group that would listen. His message was always the same. Humanity's awakening didn't make them superior, just different. They wanted peace, cooperation, and the chance to explore their heritage without interference. How are the other species reacting? He asked. Mixed, Hana admitted. The smaller nations are mostly supportive. They see humanity's rise as a way to balance against the older empires. The major powers are terrified. The Valthorix Empire is in chaos, their government collapsing as subject races rebel. The Kron Assembly has closed its borders to all human ships. The Centauri Collective is trying to form a coalition to limit human expansion. And we're supposed to meet with their representatives today? Yes, they've requested negotiations. Officially, it's about establishing new territorial boundaries and trade agreements. Unofficially, they want guarantees that humanity won't become exactly what the Valthorix feared. Dae-jung sighed. Let's get it over with. The meeting room was smaller than the Grand Assembly Hall, but still impressive. Representatives from 7 major galactic powers sat around an oval table. They looked at Dae-jung with expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed fear. Ambassador Feltrix of the Kron Assembly spoke first. She was a tall, thin creature with silver skin and far too many joints in her limbs. We appreciate you meeting with us, Dae-jung. Your fame has spread across every corner of known space. I'm just a salvage pilot who survived something I shouldn't have, Dae-jung said, sitting down across from her. I didn't ask for any of this. Perhaps not. But you have become the face of humanity's transformation, so we must ask you directly. What are humanity's intentions? To live freely, to explore, to learn about our heritage. We don't want to conquer anyone or impose our will on the galaxy. Forgive our skepticism, said Representative Thornzal of the Centauri Collective, a being that looked like a collection of crystals formed into a vaguely humanoid shape. But every expanding species says similar things until they have the power to do otherwise. The Valthorix claim to bring order and civilization. They ended up suppressing half the galaxy. We're not the Valthorics, Hana said firmly from where she stood behind Daejung's chair. Not yet, Thornzal replied. But your species is young and has suddenly discovered incredible power. History suggests this combination leads to aggression and expansion. Daejung leaned forward. Then learn from history instead of repeating it. The Valthorics tried to suppress us out of fear, and that fear became self-fulfilling. They created the exact enemy they were afraid of. Don't make the same mistake. Are you threatening us? Feltrix asked sharply. I'm stating a fact. If you treat humanity as an enemy, we'll eventually become one. If you treat us as partners, as equals, then we can build something better than what came before. The representatives looked at each other uncertainly. Finally, one who hadn't spoken yet leaned forward. This was Councillor Vriss, representing a coalition of smaller nations who had often been bullied by the major powers. Some of us believe you, Vriss said. Her species resembled Earth's octopi, but could breathe air and walk on land. We've watched how you've handled your awakening. You could have used your newfound power to take revenge on the Valthorics. Instead, you pursued justice through legal means. You could have demanded territory and resources. Instead, you've asked only for access to precursor sites that belong to no one. Your actions speak well of your intentions. But actions can change, Thornzal argued. When humanity fully awakens, when millions of your people have abilities like Daejung's, what's to stop you from taking whatever you want? Daejung stood up from his chair. The same thing that stops us now. Our values, our laws, our choice to be better than those who came before us. He looked at each representative in turn. You're right to be cautious. You're right to watch us carefully. But don't let fear turn into oppression. That path leads nowhere good. The meeting continued for hours with agreements slowly taking shape. Humanity would have access to precursor sites, but would share findings with the galactic community. Human expansion would be monitored, but not restricted unfairly. A new oversight council would be formed with representatives from multiple species to ensure transparency and prevent any single power from dominating. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Later, Daejung stood at an observation window on Haven's Rest, looking out at the stars. Hana joined him, and they watched the ships coming and going from the station. Human vessels mixed with alien ones, all peaceful, all cooperating. Do you regret it? Hana asked. If you could go back, knowing what would happen, would you still go to that moon looking for Timon? Daejung thought about his brother, about all the humans killed by the Valthoric's conspiracy, about Lord Thexral's face when he begged to be spared. He thought about the power flowing through his body now, the way his senses extended beyond normal human limits, the way he could survive in environments that would kill anyone else. I regret that Timon died, he said finally. I regret all the lives lost to maintain a lie. But the truth being revealed? Humanity learning what we really are? No, I don't regret that. Even if it means we face new challenges and new fears. The doctors say your abilities are still developing, Hana said. They think you're only at maybe 40% of your full potential. They don't know what you might become eventually. That worries you? A little, she admitted. You're my brother, but you're also something new, something unprecedented. What happens when you reach 100%? What happens when thousands of humans reach that level? I don't know, Daejung said honestly. Nobody does. We're making this up as we go along, trying to be responsible with power we barely understand. He smiled slightly. Kind of like humanity has always done, really. We've always been good at adapting, at figuring things out. This is just on a bigger scale. A message notification appeared on Hana's datapad. She read it and laughed. You're not going to believe this. There's been a breakthrough at one of the precursor sites on the edge of human space. They found what looks like a library, data crystals with information about the original precursor civilization. The scientists are calling it the most significant discovery in galactic history. Of course they did, Daejung said, shaking his head with amusement. Because apparently we haven't stirred up enough trouble lately. So what now? Hana asked. Will you go there? See what secrets these precursors left behind? Daejung looked out at the stars, at the infinite possibilities they represented. Somewhere out there were answers about humanity's origin, about what the precursors intended when they seeded Earth with modified humans millions of years ago. Somewhere out there were more challenges, more discoveries, more chances to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. Yes, he said simply. I'll go. Someone needs to be the first to walk into the unknown. Might as well be me. Just try not to get thrown into space again, Hana said. Once was enough drama for this family. Daejung laughed, the sound echoing off the observation window. Behind them, the galactic community continued its work, slowly building a new order based on cooperation instead of fear. Ahead of them, the stars waited with secrets yet to be discovered. And somewhere, in the void between worlds, the truth about humanity continued to spread, awakening a species that had slept far too long.